Hello. Good morning. Welcome to anyone that's here live, anyone that is watching on the replay. I appreciate you being here. A reminder that the Mars Day meetups are Patreon only spaces. So I thank you for being here. If you aren't on my Patreon and you happen to be here, I encourage you to exchange energy with me in whatever way feels relevant, as this is a Patreon only meetup space. So I'd love to have you there if you aren't already there. If you are, thank you so much for allowing me to continue to do this work and to meet with you, either live or on the replay. I appreciate it. These are weekly spaces where we talk about the astrology of the week ahead. We pull some tarot, generally chat, ask any questions that anybody has that they want to bring into the space, check in, share, etc. So you're always invited to be here live, watch the replay, be on camera, be off camera, use the mic, use the chat, or none of it. Show up however you feel is accessible. Because this is a Mars Day meetup, it's centered around Mars. Tuesday is Mars's day, and that's why we have it on Tuesday mornings. Mars is my Lord of the Year, so I'm working to connect with my Mars energy a little bit deeper, and I wanted to provide that into the space as well. So I always encourage you to tap into your own natal Mars energy or consider Mars's archetypes and how you can connect to Mars in new ways each Tuesday, if that feels like something you'd want to do. Okay, so we're at the end of the month, and not just the end of the month, we're at the end of March. It's March 28th today. And March 2023 is a month that astrologers have been looking at and considering and discussing for years, even decades, some astrologers. And so we're in a time of big shifts, and not everything that's happening we can see yet, right? It's a lot of big shifts, slow movement, things that take time, to see the significations of what's happening. But we're at the end of it. We made it through a lot of shifts this month. We're in a completely different landscape now than astrologically than we were when we came into March. It's completely different astrological weather. We have Pluto that is now out of Capricorn, where it had been since 2008. So Pluto's been in Capricorn since 2008, and it's finally moved into Aquarius for its first little toe dip in. It stays until the summer and then pops back out into Capricorn. But this is the first time that Pluto has been in Aquarius since the late 1700s. And it was when Pluto entered Aquarius the last time in the 1700s was the time of the French and American revolutions. And the importance of that is that both of those were the collective, humanity, right? Aquarius is tied to the collective and humanity, big groups, was fighting for their liberation, for equality, for their humanity, right? That's Pluto. Pluto levels the playing field. So Pluto in Aquarius in history can signify big changes in social structures. And so I think it's just important to notice where we are in the history of things, to notice what's happening in the world, what's happening to other human beings, right? And if you're here, you're probably already doing that. So I'm not going to go on a huge thing about it. But Pluto's in Capricorn. That's a big shift. Saturn is now in Pisces, where it hasn't been since the early 1990s. So again, another flavor of energy that is new and shifting. And it's been Saturn had been in Aquarius since March 2020, really signifying the moment that the lockdowns with COVID happened. And now as Saturn is moving into Pisces, over this last week, there's been some more information coming out that maybe we didn't know about COVID at the beginning. So I think it's interesting to see just the shifts in the way that these energies can play out along the same themes, right? So Saturn is now in Pisces. It had been in Aquarius. Now Pluto is in Aquarius. It had been in Capricorn. So that's happening collectively, and we can see it. And it's also happening in your chart. So Saturn had been moving through your Aquarius house since March 2020, really preparing it for Pluto to move in this year, because Pluto is a deeper energy. So when Saturn moved through your Aquarius house, it probably shows you a little bit about where you're restricted, or it restricted you, where you're limited, where you need to shift your responsibilities, where you need to gain wisdom or become mature or become a master of whatever those themes are in that house. Saturn was working that part of your chart for the last since March 2020. And now Pluto's there, just barely. Pluto's going to be there until like 2040 something. So it's a long transit, a long kind of maneuvering, but Pluto really is going to finish what Saturn started in that part of your chart. Pluto is now going to take that mastery, to take that responsibility, to take those changes, the things that Saturn brought up for you. And Pluto is going to say, I want you to take back your power in these areas. And this is what needs to happen to do so. And Pluto I've mentioned this before, but Pluto doesn't necessarily care about the human experience. And so by way of showing you your power, or showing you how to take back your power, it can come up in some really hard ways. And Saturn's probably already started a lot of that hard work. So now Pluto is about not lying to yourself. Pluto is about, you see this, you see that this is a pattern, you see that this is an issue. Now, what are you going to do with that? Are you going to continue to run in those same patterns, or are you going to step away, take back your power, take responsibility of what's yours, and give responsibility back to whoever, whatever that looks like? Are you going to take those steps that are very difficult, right? Pluto shows you the light, shows you the truth, and then says, now you got to deal with it. You got to let go of the stuff that is toxic to you, of the stuff that isn't equal. And this can be things that are happening to you, or it can be how you show up in relation, right? Because none of us are perfect, and it's going to show up in a lot of different ways. So considering the Aquarius house of your chart is going to be really important for Pluto activity over the next 20 some years. So it's a long transit. So right now we're in the noticing phase, right? What patterns are we noticing coming up as these shifts have been happening? So we have Pluto that moved, we have Saturn that moved this month, and we also have Mars that moved this month. So Mars is finally out of Gemini. It is into Cancer now. It's sitting at 1 degrees of Cancer, right with the moon this morning. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. But what this can signify is that the Gemini area of your chart is coming to completion, or has come to completion, on something that maybe started August, September, October of 2022, when Mars entered into Gemini and started in that retrograde area of your chart, which is, pretty much the Gemini house of your chart. It was a big chunk of it, the majority of the chart. So you may see something coming to completion, or an ending, or a shift in the wheel or the spiral of your Gemini house as well, because of what Mars happened. And then we also had the beginning of a new zodiacal year this month, last week, actually, as the sun moved into Aries, and we had the first of 2 Aries new moons. So again, a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that happened this month. We have all each held and moved through a lot, consciously or subconsciously, things that we may or may not really see the benefits, or what has happened, or what may be maneuvering underneath the surface quite yet. But that stuff's going to continue to develop and to come. But generally, I just wanted to take a moment to breathe into the fact that we are now at the end of one of the biggest, most discussed astrological months for a while. And there was a lot of shifts and a lot of changes, and a lot of people are feeling unsteady, unstable, in transition, unsure. And I just wanted to take a moment to hold any of that, to celebrate any of the wins that happened, any of the movement that has taken place this month. Where you feel stuck, maybe there's some movement or some energy now, or maybe you can feel that kind of ramping up as we move into April. No matter where you find yourself, know that there's a lot of astrological energy that you moved through this month, and I'm proud of you. And I'm going to breathe into that and open the space for anybody that wants to share. If you're here live, anything that you're bringing into the space, anything that you've moved through, just taking a moment to consider the previous week or the previous month. If you want to share as much or as little as feels relevant and comfortable for you, you can do it on mic in the chat. If you're here on the replay, pop into the comments. If you want to share anything that you're holding or anything that you've moved through with this astrology this month, along with any questions that you have. I know that a lot of you are receiving astrology, not just from me, which I always encourage. And so if anything else has come up from other astrologers that you'd like to talk about, any transits specifically that you're watching or you've been feeling, I would love to hear all of that as well. So I'm going to take a moment and pause before my check-in to make space for anybody else that wants to share, to take a little beverage break, a medicinal smoke, and I will return.
I don't know. Hey, hello, good morning. Oh, I was about to just bust right into it without even
Yes.
greeting. Hello.
Morning.
Ah, I don't, so I was unfortunately not able to pay complete attention right before you asked to check in. So I'm just kind of checking in for myself. Um, I have been going through these interesting shifts where like I feel like I'm supposed to be talking to more people and like spreading what I have to say. Not that what I have to say is important, but I feel like I can at least transfer information sometimes in a good way. But I have not been able to tap into how I can do that. And I've been like vastly ignored recently. And it's been really affecting how I feel like I'm being pushed to do things. Like I'm being pushed to talk to people, but people aren't talking back. And it's just it's just an interesting cycle for me to be in right now. And I don't know. I'm just I don't know. It feels like there's something bigger than me pushing it. So it feels like it's something in the astrology, but I can't place it and I can't figure out how to direct it past that.
Sure. Yeah. So first of all, thank you for sharing. I always love to hear what's coming up. And one of the things that I'm thinking about, and not that this is directing the pattern of this in your life, but this may be a reason that it's coming up, is we're coming off of a all that Aries stuff that has Chiron and Mercury and Jupiter together. Mercury being the way we communicate, the way that we understand others and others understand us, the way we listen, the way others listen to us. So, and Chiron, our wounds with that, not being seen, not being heard, not knowing, like, is what I have worth being said out loud, or all of that stuff falling into whatever those wounds are. And then Jupiter is the teacher. It's the one that teaches and brings the wisdom and brings the awareness. And what this transit has been bringing up for some people is around that, is I have this wisdom, I have this knowledge, and I'm not sure how to get that message across or how to get people to hear me or to understand what's coming forward. How do I fit in sharing my wisdom, which is very Jupiterian? And a lot of time, I've spoken to a lot of people specifically over this weekend that's had this come up in ways where they had something very specific that they were trying to communicate that they felt like could help someone else in their experience and their journey, and it just wasn't hitting. And that was triggering to them because of that own wound, and it's also triggering to the other person in the thing. So it's just a really kind of messy space that we're in right now astrologically because of all of that Aries stuff, which is also brave and courageous and wants to have the conversations. It wants to do the stuff, it wants to teach the things. So that's the first thing that I thought of. And then obviously I would want to look at your chart more to see, because it also sounds like a longer thing that's playing out, which makes me think to, well, Pluto with stepping into your power. That also felt very relevant in what you were talking about. Like, I have this stuff to say, and I'm not really sure how to do that in a way that is safe and healthy for me and all of the rest of the people that you're in relation to. And that can be very Plutonian. And so my invitation is to notice, which you already have done, and sit with, which you're already doing, because Pluto is a long transit and this is just a tiptoe in. And let me think about, are you a Leo rising? Remind me very quickly.
I am indeed.
Okay, which means Pluto moved into your 7th house of relationships, and
Yeah.
so partnerships and all of those conversations. Okay, cool. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Does that hit for you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The second you said Mercury, Jupiter, Chiron too, I was like, oh yeah. No,
Mhm.
that is literally my issue right now, is like
Mhm.
it's these wounds, it's the rejection sensitive dysphoria that comes with it. It's
Yep.
the like it is wanting to pass on my teachings that I learned from my teachers
Mhm.
that people don't care about. And
Mhm.
it's how do I talk to them about it? Yeah, that it's so freaky how you do that.
Well, I appreciate you being in space and always showing up so vulnerably so that I can weasel right into your energy auric field. So I appreciate you. And I'm always happy to see what's coming up. So that's good. And I'm sure that that was helpful, at least to, I know within the people that I've talked to this weekend, you're not the only one that is moving through a similar energy in that way of how to maneuver all of this wisdom that we have that is helpful. It's just sometimes we're trying to give it to people that can't receive it or aren't able to receive it, and we have to maneuver and figure all that out, which you're doing. And are you Saturn in Pisces or Aquarius?
I'd have to double check that. I
Okay,
never give me
okay,
one.
that's okay. I can also check on my end. Oh, just pull up your chart really quickly.
My
Okay.
Saturn is in Aries.
Oh, your Saturn is in Aries. So you have a while until, okay. Yeah. So May, you
Yeah.
are so far ahead of where I was at your age. I just can't even fathom that you would have had a Saturn in Aries. So the wisdom that you carry is astronomical, and there are going to be so many spaces for you to share it. And I'm very excited to see that unfold for you. And there's so much more wisdom that you have to gain in the coming years that, like, there's going to be so many opportunities for you to step into that role of, and I think my invitation that I would leave here, not that you asked for one, is to consider to notice, to continue to notice your feelings and experiences when you feel called to share something. What does that feel like in your body? And if you share and it isn't received, how does that feel in your body? And when you share and it is received, how does that feel in your body? Those are the things that I would invite you to tap into, because you're still in that beginning phase of figuring out that. And so now is like experiment, right? Like go into these conversations of like, oh, there's that feeling. I have something that I have to share, right? I know this feeling. Let me check the energy around me, right? Like, okay, I'm gonna try it. Oh, I tried it. That didn't fucking work. So right? So you're in like the gathering of Mars and Virgo. Gather
Mm.
the data, right? Get all of the information so that you can then Saturn in Pisces. Pisces is wisdom. Saturn is there right now, and it's um, allowing us to build structure around our wisdom and the things that we share and the relationships that we have and how we show up in the collective. And so, yeah, so that would be, those are my thoughts. I hope that's helpful.
That was so helpful. I really appreciate that. Like,
Yeah.
just having something to like look at and maybe focus on, okay, this is a transit happening. I can look at that energy, just really brings that back down
Yeah.
to, okay, this is a manageable thing. I'm not just freaking out about it now.
Mhm. Yeah.
Thank
Yeah. Absolutely. And that transit that happened with Mercury and Jupiter and Chiron, it's still happening. Mercury is with Jupiter today, and it hit Chiron over the weekend, which is why it feels a lot right now. Um, it will dwindle over the next couple days, but that those feelings, those triggers come up to teach us something. So just because we might not feel it so boldly, that's still a pattern that is going to continue to come up. So it's here, it's heightened. Hi, we see you. Settle down. We'll work on you. Like, like note it, got it. Right. That's kind of what this transit is here for. Cool. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay. Sweet. Um, so yeah, so with the last couple shifts, I've had Pluto move into my second house. Mars is now in my seventh house. Aries, new moon, and all of that stuff happened in my fourth house. I've talked a lot about it. But if you have anything else that anybody would like to share, again, live or in the comments on the replay about any of that stuff, we pulled the Five of Swords card last week, and I only mentioned that just so you can trickle back in your mind and see if anything came up that you want to link, that you want to notice, that you want to track, etc., etc. But there's a lot going on, so sometimes that's all too overwhelming and you don't have to track any of it. It's not necessary. Okay, so intro, check. Now we are going into the astrology of the week ahead. But before that, I wanted to show, I had a patron ask me about essential dignity. And the astrology podcast has a great chart for it. So I'm going to pull that up first, and then we'll go into the astrology of the week ahead. And then I'm going to give highlights of the astrology of April, and then we'll pull a tarot card. So boom, boom, boom. But first, let's talk about essential dignity. So essential dignity is when I talk about planets being at home or in domicile, or when planets are in fall, and like the lords of the planets and all of that stuff, that comes from this, which is essential dignity planetary rulerships. And it's traditional Hellenistic astrology that we're looking at here. So not all astrology schools follow or discuss essential dignity. This is just one of the ways that I can look for the strength of a planet within the chart. So whether it's your natal chart, an event chart, the current transit chart, this allows us to see how the planets feel, how resourced they are in the certain place. So you can see here, the signs of the zodiac fall down here on the left-hand side. And so the first one is Aries, domicile at the top. So we'll go across the top really quick. So domicile is where the planet is at home. It's the planet's rulership, right? So Mars rules Aries, Venus rules Taurus, Mercury rules Gemini, etc. Exaltation is where the planet is exalted. I've talked about this in other places, so I'm not going to go into it in depth here, but if you want to go to the astrologypodcast.com website, there's more information. There's also a podcast about it, a ton of podcasts about it. There's stuff you can Google essential dignity or domicile or exaltation in astrology, find all kinds of stuff. Or if you have specific questions, I can answer those in little blurbs. Okay, triplicity lords also give dignity, bounds and terms, deacons and faces. So all of this stuff, again, it's higher level astrology. Like if you're a beginner with astrology, I wouldn't worry about this stuff right now. And if you want to know more about it, there's a lot that you can find online, and I can help you, I'm not going to do all of it right here, but I can help you with like your questions. So feel free to pop them in the comments. If you have them here live, feel free to share. But that is the table that I wanted to show you for people that do know about Essential Dignity and can understand this. And if you can't, you can, like I said, there's podcasts and other stuff. Okay. La-di-da. The other thing that I wanted to mention is this week I plan to put out part 1 and part 2 of the Human Design Beginners series, where we talk about what human design is and what the body graph is. For those of you that already know that, these 2 ones probably won't be super helpful. They're going to be very short. So, like 5 minutes, maybe videos for part 1 and part 2. And then we'll start getting into like the profile types and the body aura types and all the different stuff from there. But part 1 and part 2 of the Human Design series hopefully will be out this week. And then also the Chiron workshop I have planned to do today and tomorrow. I'm not going to do it live because I don't have the energy or resource to facilitate the conversation that I would want to hold space for. Chiron is our deepest wounds. So I know that I would want to be able to show up in a specific way, and I just don't have the resource to do that right now. So it's going to be a pre-recorded workshop. And then if people are interested, we can talk about it more here on Tuesdays, or we can set aside a separate time to meet and talk about Chiron once the pre-recorded workshop is out. So that's all happening this week. Fingers crossed and Mercury willing. I'll have those out to you soon. So those are the updates. All right, let's get into the astrology. I'm pausing here. If there's questions, comments, concerns about this, or literally anything else, feel free to drop them in the comments or come off mic and we'll get into it. Give me just a second and I'll be back. Okay. So here is the chart of the day of the moment, March 28th, 2023 at 9:00 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. You can see here the moon is at 1 degree of Cancer, sitting directly with Mars. I love this little cuddle buddy sandwich. Mars is broody. Mars is finally out of Gemini, but it fell into Cancer. It doesn't love to be there. Mars likes to be doing things, to be actionable. And Cancer really gets swept up in the emotions and the feelings. And this can show up in very beautiful ways, like showing up in defense of the people that you love, to protect those that you love. But it can also, especially in places where feelings don't feel safe or don't feel accessible, this can come out as passive aggressive. It can come out as very irritable because there's a lot under the surface. When we think about the crab, Cancer is the crab, it has that protective shell, and then inside it's real ooey and gooey. And that ooey and gooey stuff, when there's not space for it, whether because we aren't comfortable with the emotion or because there hasn't been space for the emotion or whatever that looks like, the shell can be very harsh. It can come off as lashing out almost to protect that tenderness, that raw internal emotion. And so we can feel that in the collective, in different relationships and also in our own experiences. with just feeling a little bit more emotional, a little more tied to our emotions now that Mars is into Cancer. Maybe we're feeling more defensive of our loved ones and the people that we love. I'm hoping that this also moves into people showing up for trans people in new ways and children in new ways and all of the oppressed communities that are facing a lot of um, shit right now. I hope that Mars's ingress into Cancer allows for people to feel and act from the heart as much as they are from their mind in a more balanced way. But we'll see. We also have not so great stuff, right? So I saw this morning that there was another shooting in the United States yesterday. So there's like 129 mass shootings so far in 2023 in the United States. That's more than one a day. And yesterday's I believe was in Nashville at a school. There's all kinds of anti-trans bills that are coming up. Body autonomy is a huge topic, and I think will continue to be. With Mars and Cancer, I'm hoping that there's protections that may come up. I think about Mars and Cancer as those, you think of the archetype as like the mama bear. And with these school shootings, et cetera, and just gun control as a whole and protections of our youth, and our trans youth specifically. So I'm hoping that Mars and Cancer lends to more people standing up for kids in the right way, but it's also going to it's what we're seeing. It's both sides of it, right? It's also people standing up for kids in really shitty ways, right? In ways that are very harmful. And but that Mars and Cancer is going to defend in whatever way it feels aligned. And what a lot of people, I feel like, what I think it's important to recognize is that a lot of the people that are doing a lot of damage really truly believe in their reality that they are helping people. And that is sad and that is scary. And it's also very important to remember, right? These people, a lot of these people truly believe that they are helping. And that's when I talk about different realities and people living in different realities. That's what's happening, right? Not everybody is being shitty because they want to be shitty. Some people truly believe they're doing the right thing. And they would say the same thing about people fighting for trans youth, right? People fighting for gun control, for protections. They would say the same thing about us, that we are crazy, right? Different realities. People are living in different realities. So it's important to recognize what's true for you and how you can show up in the spaces in your own alignment. And there's protests breaking out throughout the world. So I saw overnight more stuff happening in France and in Israel. And as Pluto continues to be in Aquarius, that stuff might ramp up again. Between now and the summer, we might see more active groups coming together for liberation and equality. And so that's all very, very relevant with Pluto moving into Aquarius. Aquarius, again, is the collective. It's human structures, the structures of our society, and Pluto very much wanting to liberate and make things equal in whatever way that looks like. And so just keeping in mind that there's a lot happening in the collective. And when you're having a conversation with one person, there's a lot happening for that one person, and their reality might look different than your reality. And what does that look like for you? And how do you stay safe in relation? And how do you stay safe and aligned as you're navigating these very blurry times in reality? When we talk about reality and we talk about Pluto and Aquarius, we're also talking about AI. And, there was a whole thing with Trump's arrest where, Trump said that he was going to get arrested online. People believed it. There were AI pictures that came up with him being arrested. People believed them. People sent him over $1.5 million because he got arrested. He didn't get arrested. Like that never happened. But people are believing because of the lies and the AI now working together to become something different. And so that is very real and very part of the conversation of Pluto and Aquarius. When I first started talking about Pluto Aquarius, I talked a lot about figuring out where human and technology, where the line is, and how we protect ourselves against it, right? The internet is moving much faster than humans are aware of and are able to protect themselves against. So just be aware of how you're using your internet, where you're finding your news, you know, whose reality you're taking as reality, right? Like there's a lot of stuff right now. And this is all tied to that Neptune stuff that got set off with Neptune square Mars that was happening through that Mars stuff. But now Mars is out of Cancer, but we have Saturn structure. Saturn rules reality, the like structures, quote unquote, of reality. And it's in Pisces, which dissolves boundaries. So a huge theme of the next 3 years with Saturn moving through Pisces is what is real? Like, what is reality? There's going to be so many people that are learning more about life and reality and what it looks like through this time. And that can be a lot. So, just keeping in mind, staying centered and being aware that there's a lot happening and everybody is experiencing it in different ways, which again comes into that Aries stuff that's happening. Sometimes we can really get focused on our experience of our reality. And so we're showing up in the space that everybody else is in, having the same reality experience. And that's not true. And that's the part we have to realize with all this Aries stuff. Everybody's having an individual reality, right? So listening is just as important as sharing, is just as important as having your alone time, is just as important as being with groups. Like it's all a balance. Yay. Okay, but we're coming off of all of that like Aries stuff that we talked about over the weekend, and the moon in Gemini, which can be anxious. It can, feed us a whole bunch of mental chatter, and it was closing up that Mars in Gemini cycle. So, okay, sorry, that was a side rant I didn't really plan on going into, but here we are. So it is March 28th. It's Tuesday. The moon's in Cancer, hugging Mars, broody old Mars. So maybe this allows us to recognize where we can nurture ourselves better. Mars indicates the body, also our vehicles, but the body. So with the moon here, it's an indication of where we can nourish and nurture our bodies, or maybe it's showing us where we haven't done that so much. So maybe we're having some kind of body flare up, or maybe our emotions are really big today, right? Like Cancer is emotions. Maybe that's showing up in the body somewhere. And the moon can allow us a little hug, a little bit of nourishment, or again, showing us where that is possible, or giving us a release of the emotions in some way. There may be something that comes up today, this morning, that pushes that little tender spot that allows you to have some kind of emotional release, which I always invite, but I know it's not always comfortable. So feel free to, reach out to me if there's big things that come up, because you can also see this blue line here, which is a trine, water to water, same element. So it's a trine between the moon and Mars in Cancer and Saturn in Pisces. So this doesn't become exact until Thursday, but the moon moving through Cancer is going to hit a conjunction to Mars. And then in a couple hours later today, it's going to hit this trine to Saturn that Mars will then hit on Thursday. So the moon is going to activate this energy, which then gets completed on Thursday. I hope that made sense. So the moon comes through and sets up this Mars Saturn trine. We're going to talk about that energy a little bit more, but this can be a little bit of emotional restructuring. This can be a little bit of emotional recalibration. There may be something that comes into our orb, or that we understand on a deeper level this week, that allows us to show up in a more emotionally aligned and intelligent way with this Mars and Saturn in water. So we'll get into that a little bit more when we get to Thursday. But the moon sets that up today. Plus, we had Mercury conjunct Jupiter today at 18 degrees of Aries. So this can be really loud. This could be a lot of chatter, really loud chatter. This can be too much conversation. This can be, talking at someone or people perceiving us as being on a soapbox or talking at people, can be really present with Jupiter and Mercury, because remember, Mercury is our beliefs, it's our communication, and Jupiter amplifies things. It makes things bigger and louder and expands them. And so that can be present. Jupiter is also a healer, and it brings resource and relief and wisdom. And so this can also allow us to have very deep and philosophical and meaningful conversations today. The importance is with Chiron here that we check our triggers, and we're checking the triggers of others, and making sure that everybody's showing up in safe space, which can be very, very difficult. So yeah, just noticing where we are with all of this energy and where Aries falls in your chart, and remembering that Aries is the self. So consider that maybe we are, or the other people we're in relation to, are really hung up in our own shit right now when there's so much going on in Aries. So they can't hear you. They can't even hear themselves, probably, right? So there's a lot of stuff happening. Okay, so that's today on Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, sorry, that was the wrong way. That was a month later. We just need a day. Okay. So on Wednesday, we have the moon now in mid Cancer, and it's squaring all of that Aries stuff. So all that stuff we've been talking about with not only the sun we haven't mentioned because it's a little bit off, but the sun's going to come through and illuminate all of this stuff again, this Chiron Jupiter in Aries stuff. But today the moon's going to square it, which means our emotions might be a little big, might feel a little bit heavy. But again, this is also a really great time to have emotional conversations where the channels are open, right? This might be with yourself in the journal. This might be with your partner. This might be coming back to something that happened over the weekend. And now you have a little bit more emotional availability with the moon at home in Cancer. Now you're able to show up more emotionally available for yourself or for others. It's important, again, with all of this Aries energy. I think about the moon gathering that we did and that anchor around our Martian desires, because all of this Aries stuff is being ruled by Mars, and Mars is in Cancer. And so it's important that we really recognize what our desires are and what our motivations are, right? Like, what is it that we're trying to say or get across or complete or launch? Like, what is it we're trying to do? What's our motivation for that? What's our desire for that, right? So coming back to my anchor for Mars and all of this energy that Mars is holding with all this stuff in Aries is to choose me, right? A very basic, simple root desire for where I am right now. But when I'm feeling really swept up, or when I'm needing to make a decision, or when I'm feeling triggered, it's a reminder for me to check in on my motivations, right? Am I doing this in a way that's safe for me? Because when I choose me, it's also part of that for me is also that it's not harming the people that I love and the people I'm in community with and the people that I honor and cherish on this earth, right? And the earth, right? That I'm not harming the earth, that helps me. Like, that's all part of choose me for me and my motivations. So that's an anchor for me to remember when I get stuck and hung up in all of this energy, specifically all of this Aries energy. I get to come back to that desire and that motivation so that I know that I'm not acting from a place of ego, because Mars in fall in Cancer can very much get stuck into its ego driven, broody kind of defensiveness when it's in Cancer. And so nourish your Mars when you're struggling, especially over the next couple days with all of this Aries energy. Nourish your Mars. Recognize your desires and your motivations and why you're wanting to do whatever it is that you're wanting to do. And getting more clear on that can help you bring clarity to the next step of what that looks like. Okay. So then, sorry, next day. So then we get to Thursday, the 30th, and this is a big day. So March 30th on Thursday, we have a decent amount going on. So first we have the moon hitting a trine. So again, a positive, flowing, creative aspect between the moon in Cancer and Neptune at 25 degrees of Pisces. This is dreamy. This is, maybe you get to sleep in a little bit longer this day, or maybe you feel very creative. Maybe there's some piece of that dream, like actual dream at night, that comes through and gives you steps on the bigger dream or the vision of how to move forward. But then we have a void of course moon for the majority of this day. So until about 6:30 p.m. Eastern time, we have a void of course moon. And I always invite people during the void of course to just flow, to allow yourself to do and go wherever you feel naturally driven. When a moon is void of course, it means it's not tied to any other planet. So it's made the last aspect that it will make in that zodiac sign. So here at 25 degrees of Cancer, the last aspect that the moon will make moving through Cancer is Neptune at 25 degrees, this trine. So once it hits this and moves past it, it'll be a little bit later, like 9:30 or something. It'll move past 25 degrees in 39 minutes. And then the moon moves into a void of course. And the moon isn't tethered to any other planet. So the moon can just do moon things. And that is going to be different based on your own chart, based on where this falls in your chart, and based on your own moon, natal moon placement. So, but anyway, the void of course moons allows for some flowiness, to go wherever your moon and your needs take you on that day. But we also have other stuff going on. This is the exact day that Mars comes into that trine with Saturn that the moon set up today. Now we're at Thursday, and this is exact. So the thing about this trine, again, trine is flowing energy. These planets can work together in a very creative and supportive way when they're having, because they're in the same element, right? And water here, Pisces and Cancer work well together. The energies can flow together. So this is a trine and it's happening at 2 degrees of water. And it's the third one. So Mars has been retrograde in Gemini, as we know, for a while. And the first and second trine that happened during that retrograde cycle with Mars and Saturn happened when Saturn was in Aquarius and Mars was in Gemini. It was air. It was in the mind, right? Now we have this same trine happening in water, which moves it to the heart. It moves it to the emotions. It moves it to the blood, right? This trine that these two bring together. So when we have Mars and Saturn, we're talking about Mars likes to go. It's the action. It wants to do things, get things done. Saturn wants to build strong structures. It wants to take things slow. When they're working together, it can help us build something very sustainable. It can give us support to take the next step in some endeavor. And the importance of it being in air first for the first two was that allowed us to get our minds and the logistics kind of situated. And now with this trine, it allows us to get our emotions involved. This is a more emotional trine. It settles things deeper. Maybe this allows us to recognize where things are worth our emotional energy and where things are not, right? So it's honoring what is worth our emotions and recognizing what isn't. So I'm specifically thinking about in my journey, I am choosing to a lot less often to get into conversations online on social media. I'm not fighting with people. I'm really not even conversing. Because I haven't seen in my experience that brings me back any amount of energy that I'm putting out. I am wasting energy in those spaces, and it's not emotionally aligned for me. And I see that now in a very new way than I felt when they were in air signs, which is the internet and communication and all of those things. But now in water, I can recognize the toll that it's taking on my physical body, my emotional experience, and how I can't show up emotionally in the spaces that I want to. And so there's a restructuring. That's my experience. It can be totally different for you. But my point is that there's a different feeling now that this is happening, this trine is happening in water. And we're feeling that all week again because the moon kicks it off today and then it comes into place on Thursday. But the invitation for this is to honor what's worth your emotional energy and what's not, and to recognize where you can assert yourself on behalf of the people that you love. How can you show up for people that you're emotionally invested in, right? Maybe that's you, right? That's where I would start. I would start with myself. And then if I'm showing up for myself, or if I'm not the one that needs showing up for right now, how can I do that for the people that I love, for the people that I'm in community with, for the people that I share space with, that I have emotional ties and connections to, that feel reciprocal, right? Not the people that I feel emotionally connected to, but it feels very out of balance. Those are the people I'm talking about showing up for. I'm talking about showing up for the people that you're emotionally involved and in balanced relationship with, or collectively, right? The groups of people that you want to show up and defend, less personally, right? But more as a group, as a collective. So all of those things can be things that you discover here, but it can also just be very stabilizing, and it can allow you to get things done. Mars and Saturn working together, get shit done one way or another. There's the ability to take a step forward in this space. To give you the dates of that you can take back for the other two trines. So the first trine that happened in air between Mars and Saturn was at the end of September 2022. The second one was the end of November 2022. And then we have this third one here in March 30th, 2023. Okay, and then we're not done. We have something else that's happening on Thursday. I told you Thursday is the big day. So the other thing that we have happening is in Taurus. You can see here we have Venus at 16 degrees and we have Uranus at 16 degrees. 16 degrees Taurus is also where we had an eclipse. And that happened, I think, in November of 2022. I thought I had that written down, but maybe I do not. Yeah, November 2022, we had an eclipse at 16 degrees of Taurus. So this is the same place. So this can be a callback to the last eclipse season, what was coming up in November 2022, or with those Taurus Scorpio eclipses in general. Venus and Uranus in Taurus. So Venus is at home in Taurus in its domicile. Venus likes to be there, but Uranus can be a little bit unstable. It can be a little bit reckless. It can be a little bit upsetting or surprising or shocking or new. It can be exciting, right? There's a lot of ways that this can show up. Collectively, I'm interested to see if this shows up in shocking or surprising things that come out around. Venus is very much tied to oppressed communities. So I'm interested to see any news that happens to come out around the anti-trans bills, abortion, any of that stuff. But also in our personal lives, this can be a time to explore something new within our relationships. This can be sometimes like an adventure or something exciting that comes up. But again, it can feel unsteady and it can feel unsure. But this is also, I had a Venus Uranus transit happen a couple years ago that I was tracking, and it was really fun for me to recognize how these energies can show up in a way of bringing us into relation with something that maybe we wouldn't choose to do, whether it's to try something to eat, right? Taurus. Maybe it's we try something new or try a new fashion thing, right? Just thinking of like Taurus pop astrology stuff, but it can be all kinds of different things. But maybe you try something new on this day that you normally would never try, and you realize, oh my God, this is my favorite new food, right? That can also be Taurus and Uranus, right? Or Venus and Uranus. So it's new, it's adventurous, it's exciting, but it can be a little bit unstable, a little bit unsure or chaotic, even upsetting, even. Um, but it can also, you know, bring us into great things. So just knowing that that is there at the same time that we're having, you know, the void of course, which is making us feel a whole different flowy way. And we also have Mars and Saturn in water signs, which is emotional and also super creative. This is also a super creative day if you're able to tap into that at all. So a lot of stuff to move through on the 30th. It's all going to depend on where these things are hitting in your chart. So again, the moon and Neptune are at the end of water signs. Mars and Saturn are at the beginning of water signs. And then Venus and Uranus are at 16 degrees of Taurus. So seeing what is getting hit for you can help you see what energies you want to lean into or be aware of in your own experience. So that's the big day. And then we get to Friday. We now have the moon in Leo. And with the moon in Leo, it's going to hit a trine. So that same trine, flowing creative energy to the sun. This can be sweet. We're still feeling Mars and Saturn on this day in a trine as well. So this can be some flowing energy as we leave the month of March. It can be confident. It can bring us a little bit of energy, a little bit of confidence to show. It's fiery, right? Leo and Aries. So it wants to perform, it wants to have a good time, it wants to adventure, it wants to be seen. And so all of those things available as we leave the month on Venus's day. Venus still close to Uranus, but has now moved past Uranus and can kind of come into its last decan through Taurus for the beginning of April. So the month ends completely differently than how we started. So if we want to just skip back, so this is going to be Friday, March 31st. And if we go back a month, look how spread out all of the planets are, right? We have things moving from Capricorn to Gemini. But now we move over and we can see this cluster of energy here by the end of the month. We have this cluster of energy in Aries and in Taurus that's really moving us into April. So then by Saturday is April 1st. And, you know, we're going to go through April a little bit deeper, but this is mid to late degrees of Leo. So it's now going to, the moon, sorry, is mid to late degrees of Leo. So it's going to be hitting trines to these end degrees, Aries stuff. So again, bringing up all of that Aries stuff now in a trine. So the moon is now more supportive of the way that we're moving through. A couple days ago, we had the moon hitting squares when it was in Cancer to this Aries stuff. That's a little more volatile. That's a little more ouchy. Now it's in Leo, they're both in fire. So there's a little more confidence, there's a little more it's less sensitive, it's less tender as it was when the moon was hitting a square and the moon was in Cancer. Now it's a little more fiery. We can have the conversation. It doesn't hit as hard. We're not as tender. We're not as raw. We're able to kind of move through it in a new way. But the moon will hit a square to this Venus Uranus stuff on this day. So it's not all gravy, right? There's everything here. So if you have mid to late degrees, you know, you got a lot of stuff going on this week, right? We have all this stuff happening in Aries. We have this stuff happening in Taurus, and the moon is going to be moving through, just illuminating, right? In trines and in squares, really illuminating what's happening in the Aries Taurus sections of the chart. So then on Sunday, we have the moon now moving into Virgo, and it's going to hit an opposition to Saturn. This is the first time since Saturn has moved into Pisces that we will have a Virgo moon. So Virgo transiting moon with Saturn opposing. So it's a different vibe. Saturn's here now. It's a little more serious. And we're thinking about the details. We're thinking about what exactly we need to be doing. This can be very task driven. This can be very critical. This can feel very harsh. And so remembering on Sunday morning, if things feel a little bit heavy, it's the moon. It's the first time the moon is moving through this part of the chart opposing Saturn. And so it can be like a little bit like, ow, wow, like Saturn is the authority, it's the disciplinarian. And so there may be something that happens on Sunday morning that feels a little bit just ouch. But then in the afternoon, it hits a sextile to Mars. And this allows for a little bit. So ouchie in the morning with the opposition to Saturn. But then the sextile to Mars later in the day allows us to move with whatever it is that we learned or we saw or information that we gathered with the opposition to Saturn. Then Mars lets us kind of move with that later in the day. Also later in the day, Mars is going to hit a sextile to the North Node here at 4 degrees of Taurus. So again, allowing us to kind of take action in whatever it is that has come up, either the night before or that morning as the moon moved into Virgo and hit that opposition to Saturn. Then Mars gets some support from the North Node and the moon to take some action in some way around something. And then that takes us to Moon Day, April 30th. And on this day, we have the moon still in Virgo, now going to pick up on this Uranus, Venus stuff in Taurus. And Mercury is at the end degrees of Aries. We can see at 29 degrees of Aries on Moon Day on the 3rd. And it's starting to pick up on this square to Pluto at 0 degrees of Aquarius. That's actually going to come into effect next week. So we'll talk about that on next Tuesday, but we're already going to be feeling that, and that can be heavy. Pluto is the underworld. Mercury is our minds, our beliefs. This can be obsessive thoughts. This can also just be deep conversations, but it can be a lot. It can be heavy. So bumpers at the beginning of the week to be helpful, because coming off of that Virgo moon is critical. It takes a laser focus to our internal experience, to our mind, to our emotions, to our internal landscape, the moon. Virgo is looking at the details, the data, fine tooth comb through that shit, and can be critical because it wants to perfect it, right? And so this opposition to Saturn, all that stuff that happens on Sunday, can set us up for a Monday with Mercury picking up on that square to Pluto to be deep and in it, like in our head stuff. Obsessive thoughts can be very present. So if you struggle with that generally, maybe reach out to a friend, a partner, me over the weekend, and just have a space to land whatever's coming up for you. And remember that the moon's just being a little crabby, right? Just being a little critical. And it's because the moon in Virgo wants you to be your best, and it knows how great you can be. And sometimes we just have to say, hey, Virgo, let me breathe. I'm a human being. I'm doing my best, right? But there's also some really good availability to get information and data that maybe we haven't seen before, now that Saturn's there opposing the moon in Virgo. And that's going to be happening for the next 3 years as Saturn moves through Pisces. It's going to be opposing the transiting moon moving through Virgo every time for the next 3 years. This is the first time to notice what that might feel like. So that's Sunday. We're just noticing. And then, putting up bumpers and reaching out to people where needed. But also some really good available information and data that maybe we didn't have access to before, that lets us then tap into, as we move through April, new ways to navigate this new landscape, new astrological landscape, and also physical landscape that many of us are finding us in relation and in real life. So, okay, that's the week. That's the week ahead astrology. Before we go and before we pull tarot, I'm also going to do an April overview. It's going to be very quick. I'm not going to show you the chart at all, but I wanted to open space for any questions, comments, concerns. May in the chat, as I was talking about the Virgo moon, said in asterisk, stares at my natal Virgo moon. And yes, it could be very critical. And every time I see anybody with a Virgo moon, I always hold a little space for that. I know that it's a very difficult placement to have, and it's a difficult transit to take. So always holding space. But I love a Virgo moon also. So it's like, it's both and always. But yeah, I know that it can be a hard internal struggle. And a lot of people will never see it. That's the other thing about Virgo, is Virgo often is having a whole experience internally that nobody else is ever going to know about. And it's not always nice. Virgo can be hard. So yeah. All right. But also Virgo can get shit done where other people just, other placements just can't. Virgo is a go-getter. Get shit done. May said you just summed up my whole life. Yeah, pretty much. Okay. Cool. So if you're here on the replay and you have questions, comments, concerns, always feel free to share them in the comments. I appreciate hearing from you. Okay, I'm going to pause and then I'm going to do a quick rundown of April, and then we're going to pull from the Next World Tarot deck today for the tarot of the week ahead. I love that deck. All right, I gotta smoke first, then we'll be back. Okay, so I have the chart of April 1st up. I'm going to do a quick rundown of anybody that takes notes or wants to mark on their calendar, etc., or just likes to see of the big stuff. We're going to go through the two main lunations of the month, then the ingresses where planets move into other signs, and then also this month of April, we start retrograde season. So I'm going to give you those dates as well. So first, the lunations. On the 6th, April 6th, we have a full moon in Libra at 16 degrees. That means the moon is at 16 degrees of Libra. The sun is at 16 degrees of Aries, the Aries Libra axis of your chart. And also, what's there, you ask? Chiron. So by that point, you will definitely have the Chiron workshop to get a little bit more intimate with working with Chiron during this time that it's so active. So that's happening on the 6th of April. The new moon, so we have the second Aries new moon in a row. It's an eclipse at 29 degrees of Aries, and it happens on 4/20. It happens on April 20th. We have a new moon eclipse at 29 degrees of Aries. That means the moon and the sun are together at 29 degrees of Aries in the sky. And those are the two lunations of the month. And then we have the ingresses when planets move from sign to sign, so into different houses of your chart. On the 3rd, on April 3rd, which is Moon Day, I didn't mention that on the day on this, because it happens later in the day. We're really going to feel it for the first time on the 4th. But on April 3rd, Mercury moves into Taurus. On April 11th, Venus moves into Gemini. And on April 20th, right after that Aries new moon, the sun will move into Taurus. So again, the 3rd, Mercury into Taurus, the 11th, Venus into Gemini, the 20th, the sun into Taurus. And then let's talk about retrograde season. So we have, if you remember from previous conversations, and if you don't, I'm about to tell you, Mercury is going retrograde in all of the earth signs this year. So it started the year retrograde in Capricorn. And in April, it's going to station retrograde in Taurus. And then later in the year, it's going to do its retrograde in Virgo. And so as Mercury moves into Taurus in April, it sets up for its retrograde. Retrograde season starts in April. It starts with Mercury. And then in May, we have some other planets turning retrograde. But Mercury is the only one going retrograde in April. It starts on the 21st. So the day after the Aries new moon, we have Mercury turning retrograde at 15 degrees of Taurus on the 21st of April. The retrograde is going to be between 5 degrees of Taurus and 15 degrees of Taurus. So that place in your chart and any placements that are hitting between 5 to 15 degrees of Taurus are going to be affected by this Mercury retrograde. Also, fixed sign risings will be feeling this specifically because you'll have this in your angled houses, the 1st, the 4th, the 7th, and the 10th house. So the shadow for retrograde, so I'm going to give you those dates now. So the actual station retrograde starts on April 20th. And it comes out of retrograde and stations direct on May 14th. So those are the weeks of the actual Mercury retrograde. But then we have the shadow phase. When it first hits 5 degrees of Taurus, where it will come back to, that happens on April 7th. So on April 7th, Mercury hits the place where it will return. So that's where we start to pay attention to what's happening with Mercury, because Mercury will be back to that point in our chart to visit it again. So April 7th, 5 degrees of Taurus, and then it goes all the way to 15 degrees. On the 20th, it stations retrograde. It moves back. It stations again at 5 degrees of Taurus on the 14th of May, and then it comes back and it comes out of shadow in June on June 1st. So the whole shadow period is April 7th to June 1st. The actual retrograde is April 21st to May 14th. 5 to 15 degrees of Taurus. Okay. And that is the astrology of the week ahead and the astrology of April highlights. Questions, comments, concerns of anyone live, always welcome. If you're here in the comments, feel free to, or here on the replay, feel free to pop into the comments with any questions, comments, concerns about anything that came up today, anything you'd like for me to go into deeper, any questions you have about this or literally anything else, can come up here as I prepare the tarot deck. As I prepare the deck, I always invite you, if you want to receive the messages from the card of the week, feel free to take some breaths, check into yourself, get centered, aligned to receive any messages that come forward. And I will be right back. All right. So again, we are using the Next World Tarot deck. And this is for the week of March 28th through April 3rd, 2022. Specifically for the folks that are here live and watch the replay, a card of guidance for their week ahead, something to come to center into, gain resonance, go deeper into their process. Again, feel free to take what resonates from the card. As always, I will leave it here for you, and then I will post a little bit about what comes up for me in the astrology of the card of the week ahead in Patreon. But what comes up for you here is specific to your journey, and it's your intuition's way of guiding you into the next moments. The messages that you receive don't have to have anything to do with what we talked about here. Noticing what comes up for you, how you feel, what you notice in your body, in the card, resonance or resistance that you have to the card or this experience in general. Always important to note and notice. Card for the week ahead. We get the Two of Pentacles card. I'll post a picture of the card to Patreon as well for you to use or lose as you feel necessary. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you all. I'm here to chat about anything that comes up for you. If you need space, have any questions, thank you for being here. I hope you have a week, and we'll talk soon.